Mic test. Kathy, Kathy, Kathy. That one work okay? Kathy test? Okay. Do you need any others?
Okay. Calling the meeting to order. It is 7:05, Tuesday, June 3rd of the Colchester Planning Commission. All right, we have agenda considerations reserved for changes to agenda from items in order. We're not changing anything, right?
No, I may just add a few staff items at the end, if that's okay.
Okay, that's good. That works. Comments and questions from the public. We're good there. So now let's start our discussion for amendments to Colchester Development Regulations Supplement 48.
How is the font size, guys?
Yes.
One more? Happy to.
Perfect.
Okay. So, most of these will look familiar. Couple key notes since the last time, and we'll go through each of them individually. But just a couple key notes from the top. One thing missing, the ADU discussion I dropped out just because I don't think we were quite ready to include it anywhere near a public warrant, a public hearing. And given how far I think we were from that, Rich and I talked, we decided to drop that out for now. We can, but it's not gone. We'll circle back. It'll be in 49, which will probably be a lot closer than you think. It'll probably be on the heels of 48, given the things that we have left. So that has been dropped out of here. One new thing added, which we'll get to, but that is item, sorry, I don't know why that's not going down. I'll talk about that specifically when we get to it. That's G, landscaping budget requirements. I will talk to you about that when we get to it. And then two things that are new since last month, but not new. Circled back to the form-based code GD3 discussion. We haven't talked about them since the fall, but they aren't new to you. They were the two items of a longer list that were closest to development. We talked about language. Everybody was in pretty good agreement about them. I would look, if you are interested, you can look back at the full list of items. They were last discussed, I think, in November, maybe it was the meeting before that, October. There was a full list of form-based code items then. And there were some things we were still talking about. There was the garage setbacks, that was the bay requirements. There was a request that I don't think you ever truly entertained related to residential uses on the first floor on certain streets. That didn't get a lot of airtime, but it is still on your list as a request. And then there were these two items here that we'll go into in more detail as we go through the list. But these two, read back through all the minutes, read back through the language. You had talked about very specific language. Everybody was comfortable with the text of what's included here. So if you're comfortable, I'm recommending you include this in the warning, but we didn't talk about it last month. So if you're not comfortable, you won't hurt my feelings either. Sound fair? You can give me some feedback on that when we get to the end. But so that's really the change in the overall list. The last thing I'll say is that these have been reordered. So if you're trying to compare this month with the last few months, I've reordered these to be in the order that they are in the regulations, so that if you are trying to follow along side by side with this list and the regulations, you don't have to bounce around. They're in order. You can do, sort of a search for find next in anything that's been changed, and they'll be in order of changes. So until you get to the very end where it says minor changes. Sound fair?
Answers the question. I noticed it was
It's reordered, yeah.
reordered, and I was like, that's an odd thing.
Yeah,
Now
because
I
they
got
had
it.
just sort of ended up on the list in the order that we talked about them, with
Yeah.
no real rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
But I think I like to keep them in order because it just makes it easier to
Yeah.
to read them
Yeah, sounds good.
when you're following along. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, I only have a single screen here, so we'll have to go back and forth to show you the real language. To keep the memo not overly burdensome, I did not take the full text of the regulation and put it in here, but I gave you the actual section so that you could find it as easy as possible. That's a little bit of change of how I sometimes do it, where I try to put the text, but then it comes without context of the full chapter. So, density calculations. Oh, this is another one that we've talked about before, but we didn't talk about it last month when we were going through the list. So this goes back to 181. This goes back to a memo that you got from Zach back in, I have it in front of me actually, September or October. It was the October 1st meeting. Zach walked you through a full list of changes that came from Act 181. That was legislation from the close of the 2024 session. So the density calculations and how we treat duplex dwellings was part of what came from that. There were a few other things. I do encourage you to look at that memo from the October 1st meeting. Some things didn't require any changes from us. Some things we just haven't gotten to yet, and they'll be in the next section. And then there was one thing that we just never really finished our conversation about, if you remember, that was that crazy parking space requirement. Yeah, Rich remembers now. Where they told us parking spaces needed to be shorter than what we require, but didn't really contemplate the non-parallel or non-90 degree parking spaces. So that's not in here. Do you have something you want to add? No. Okay. You can. So the only thing from 181 that is in this draft for this supplement is how we treat duplex units. And as a reminder, and it was sort of in the legislation from the year before, but it got clarified even more with this, is that anywhere you can have a single unit, and this is state law, but we've now got it in our regulations to make it extra clear, anywhere that a single unit dwelling is allowed, you're also allowed to have a duplex with no extra density.
And I'm going to apologize ahead of time if I ask a question that we answered a while ago. Just in terms of the duplex, is there any limit? I mean, and maybe I should know this, of how many units can be in a duplex?
Just two.
Just two?
Yeah, so our definition says two in the same structure.
Okay.
So a duplex has to have a shared wall.
Yep.
You can't have two units side by side and call it a duplex, or not side by, two separate units without shared walls and call it a duplex. This is very specific to two units sharing a single building.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So again, that's the thing. We've seen a couple people, just so if you're curious, we have seen a couple people take advantage of it. By take advantage, I don't mean like badly. Either because they were building it new, or they had an existing building and they're like, hey, I want to turn this into two separate units. Sometimes it's people who come in starting with an ADU, and then they don't like the owner-resident requirement, and so they go the duplex route. So it's a variety of things, but we have seen this enable a second unit where otherwise there might not have been. But it hasn't led to rampant extra units being built either. If I had to guess, single digits. But there's definitely some movement with it. So that's what this language does. Nothing different than state law already allows. We would already allow it. This just puts the language in the regs. Okay.
Yep.
Moving on. just to trigger your memory. Non-conforming structures damaged by fire or natural disaster, replacement. So what you have in italics there, that is existing language that had said that you had a year in total after a non-conforming structure, any structure, whether it's a whole dwelling unit or a shed or anything like that, a deck, a whole business, a commercial structure, any non-conforming structure that's damaged, destroyed, or removed, you had a year to fully replace it. That's to permit it and build it. 1 year. I think there was some recognition that a year to do that is not a lot of time between the permitting process and the construction process, materials acquisition, et cetera. And so what you'd agreed on before was to say that you have a year to obtain a permit. And a permit, just as a reminder, gives you 18 months to construct. So this is also nice for our perspective because a year to build, it's hard to say when something is finished building as well. So a year to permit is a very clean end. Like there's a date, certain. So a year to get a permit. This is nothing new here. This is language you'd already talked about.
Yeah,
Just,
no.
these are quick
All
questions,
you
I'm
want,
telling
you
you.
go for it.
So just, and I'm sure we talked about this, when I was reading through, I just didn't remember what was said. Does the purpose of the accessory dwelling have to be the same as it was when it burned down or was destroyed?
Yeah, so what we talked about was because it's a non-conforming structure, it would still have to meet everything that we permit and regulate with respect to non-conforming structures. So you can't build any extra. You can't exceed what you'd had before. So this is like sort of like grandfathering rights, vesting rights to what you had. So if your structure was on the lake, and we wouldn't allow that today, you can't be more on the lake. If you were in a floodplain or a wetland, you can't be more in that wetland. If you had more units than you were supposed to, or you were taller or something.
If it was like a garden shed that burned down and then you put a pool in, could it be a pool house?
No.
Okay, so the purpose, it would have to still be a garden shed.
Unless that would be allowed now.
Okay,
If a pool house would not be allowed today, you couldn't change it to a pool house.
okay.
If it would be, then absolutely, and you wouldn't have the same restriction. So this is just to grandfather you with that non-conforming status, something you
Gotcha.
wouldn't be allowed to build today.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, you're restricted. And same thing, if you had had a deck that had been lost, you couldn't now turn that deck into a 3-season room or new living space. It's still just a deck. So you just get what you had, but you don't get more. And that's the same with all non-conforming structures, whether you tear it down or not, or it's lost for other reasons. Sound good?
Sounds
Some
good.
questions?
Thank you. No,
And if at any point you want to see the actual language associated with this, just let me know. I'll switch over to the regs. Okay, but I'm not going to unless you tell me to.
Yep.
Rebuilding of unpermitted structures and non-conforming structures. So this is the one, we talked about this across several meetings. As a reminder, 15 years is our statute of limitations in Vermont. If you build something you're not supposed to, and we don't know about it for more than 15 years, congratulations, you got away with it. You're vested with it. We can't now come after you and say, tisk, tisk, you're in trouble. Because once you've hit that 15-year mark, we cannot do that. There is some case law that suggests, so then what happens? If Jane Smith builds a deck in a floodplain, And it's been 20 years. We know that we cannot say, Jane, we're going to send you a fine for having built there. We're going to take you to court, et cetera, et cetera. We know that we can't do that. We've always known that. But there's some case law that suggests that if the floodwaters rise and that shed is lost, Jane, you were never supposed to have it. It's gone. So sorry. But there's some case law that suggests that if you're silent, if your regulations are silent on that there may be some vesting rights to that shed that you were never supposed to have. But it does suggest that if you do speak to it and say specifically, you lose those rights once it's gone, that the municipality can say that. So this is us trying to stop being silent on that and say that, hey, you had it while you had it, but now that it's gone, it's gone. And there's some intricacies with the language. We did talk about it at length. That, you do have some rights to repair. So if you had a deck, for example, and you lost a few floorboards or they were starting to get weathered, there are rights written into this that allow you to repair those. Or if a tree falls on and damages 10% of it. The way that this is written, you're allowed to replace that. But if more than 50% of it is lost, it's lost. You don't get it back.
Just a kind of word thing on in the third paragraph, second paragraph on the third line.
Is this the memo or the regulation?
Under C, rebuilding of unpermitted. It just says, I think you need to just take out any, the word any, on the third. The commission further made clear that no changes could take place. I think you just want to take out any, right?
Let me catch up with you. You're in the third line?
Paragraph, second paragraph, third line. We're starting with the commission.
Oh, I understand. Okay. Yep. I will make a note to do that because this memo will transform into, thank you.
Yep.
See. Okay.
Yep.
Any thoughts, any issues with the text itself in the regulation? Okay. Did you want to see it? Are you good?
No, I'm good.
I mean, you do have it. You've seen it.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay. Would you like me to move on?
Yep.
Okay. So this gets into our GD3. So, A Street building setbacks. So you guys talked about this across several meetings. So as a reminder, A Streets are your big streets. Blakely, Severance, Roosevelt Highway. The initial regulation contemplated that these would be streets where buildings would be very close to them. Buildings would sit essentially right on top of these roads. And it's become sort of clear, and especially at the intersections. So what we talked about, just as a refresher, is that especially because the buildings are not right at the intersections where traffic is sort of stopped and at its slowest, and because the buildings are set back quite a bit more from that intersection where speeds are still sort of higher, 30, 40 miles per hour, that buildings 5 feet, 10 feet off the road, especially residential buildings, are having traffic go by at 40 miles per hour, which is different than you think about like Five Corners or Main Street Winooski, where you have buildings that are that close, but the traffic isn't flowing at that speed. So we talked about maybe providing a little extra setback than what's allowed. So right now, it's only 0 to 18 feet. A building has to be no further than 18 feet from that setback. It has to be absolutely no further than 18 feet from that right away. So what you guys had talked about, I know it's been a while, was to allow a little bit more with a lot of conditions that you get a little extra if you're taller, because it's kind of hard to make the argument that you've got all these upper story residential's close if you're not upper stories. That if you do create this extra space, that you have to do something with it. You can't just have this dead blah space that you're putting in our growth center. You can't have parking in it. That you have to program it either for like a little parklet or space for the people who live there, or if it's a restaurant or civic space, that it's, or a store space, that it's a storefront area or seating. So those were all things. So there's nothing in there that you didn't already see, look at, and approve. The only difference is that you can now see, and I may even open it up so you can see the formatting of it.
Can't remember the numbers. How far did we go?
Let's take a look at it.
There we go.
I'm going to leave it small just while I scroll because it goes faster.
Yeah.
Well, actually, just kidding. I can't see it. I need to make it bigger.
When the artwork starts.
Yeah, it's sort of a giveaway, huh? It's not that far, though. It's only like chapter 4, right? Not that artwork, though. That's sign artwork.
You're in it.
A Street standards. Look at that. I got lucky. I'll get bigger. Don't worry. So, I know you probably don't spend a lot of time in this section. I wouldn't blame you. So our form-based code, GD3, just to get you comfortable with the section, gives you a list of very specific list of uses that are only unique to this area. Basically, it says a lot of things are permissible. Basically, you can do anything but industrial uses, essentially. And then there's a special table for A streets, B streets, C streets. So the graphic for A streets, the way that I've done this here, hopefully it'll work out when all the redlining is accepted, but we'll see. Let me make it bigger. So over here you can see there's this front setback for primary buildings, principal buildings. That was 0 to 25 or to 18. So basically this was changed to 5 to allow a little bit of setback for snow storage and stuff. And 25 feet with a little 1. So 25 feet's like, if you don't do anything at all, you can have 25. But setbacks are providing accordingly. 10 feet per additional story over 2 stories, never to exceed 50. If you remember, we did a little exercise that showed you what 50 looked like. I think the dentist office is something like 35 feet back. And McGillicuddy's was something like 45 feet back or something. Or vice versa. Which one's closer? Yeah, they're about 10 feet apart. One's closer than the other, but just to give you some perspective about where 50 feet would end up.
Yep.
And again, the space within, you know, that new extra space you're getting, no parking, no access drives, civic amenity. You gotta put some seating in it, et cetera, et cetera. And then we put this little extra thing in at the end that says the DRB under exceptional circumstances could provide even more if, or could adjust where that right-of-way is if there's real reason to believe that there's a future widening. So VTrans is looking at that intersection right now, and they may change where that right-of-way is. If they do that, that 18 feet is going to get shrunk real fast, and you actually may only be like 5 feet off. So this gives the DRB the authority to use some common sense, if that's the case, and not tie their hands quite as firmly. So.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Now's the time.
Okay. I'm thinking that that area, we would want sidewalks and crosswalks so people could go to the different quadrants. And I'm just imagining you'd want a sidewalk there, right?
Mhm.
So if you had zero setback, would you not be able to put a sidewalk in there?
So those would probably be in the right of way, right? Is that what we've been doing?
What do you mean?
Um,
If one was to be built? I think it would depend on how much room is in the right of way to begin with. There are times where, through the development review process, an applicant will provide an additional 5-foot area as an easement on their property. But generally, I mean, where the sidewalk ends up actually being placed, I think, the goal, I think, is to keep it within the right of way if possible.
So like, for example, Sunderland Farms, which is the one that's under construction mostly right now, that has a 10-foot rec path the whole length along Severance Road. And that's, I believe, in the right of way. No? Is it on private?
Ooh.
Okay.
I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, that's probably another reason to provide for additional relief, to give at least the DRB the
Yeah.
ability to accommodate that, because if it was 0 to 18 feet and that's entirely taken up by a rec path, there's no place to put that building.
Yeah. I just think something where people could walk and cross Route 7,
Yeah.
to get to, because I think right now there isn't really anything except that walk around where McGillicuddy's, that quadrant. There's no sidewalk to kind
So-
of get to the light if you wanted to cross over. Let's say there were restaurants or stores or something and you wanted to cross over. I don't e-
V-Trans is definitely working on that with the intersection design. As far as getting from quadrant to quadrant,
Yeah,
that's part of the V-Trans design, not just for pedestrians, but also for cyclists they're working on.
okay.
So we've seen the initial draft of that. That said, it's going to be a while
Yeah,
before they go to construction,
yeah.
but they do have designs,
For pedestrians to walk,
pedestrians
Okay.
and bike lanes.
to get to the 4 quadrants.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine then,
And then
whatever.
within the quadrants, plans for access within. Yeah.
Great,
And the
Good.
DRB's really good about that.
good,
Great.
thank you.
Good with that one?
Yep.
Are you comfortable with going forward? Because we haven't talked about it since the fall.
Yeah, no, I remember the whole, yeah.
Good?
Yep.
All right. And, formatting may change based on how things fit, but the text will not.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So part 2 of that is this accessory structure thing, which we talked about also for a while. Flashback. And there was some debate with people who were advocating for this, but you made clear what you wanted, and that's what I listened to. And I'll bring that back up too, so you can see exactly where that landed. Just so you remember, so what the genesis of this was that accessory structures are what they sound. They're accessory to something else. And if they're not on the same lot as something else, they're not accessory, they're a principal building, which is fine through most of Colchester. But in the form-based code district, if they are a principal building, if they're the only building on a lot, they have to meet certain design standards. But, we had folks who own land in the growth center say, look, do I really have to have windows and certain design standards for a maintenance shed? But I don't want that to be on the same lot as something else. What if I just want a pool shed or a maintenance garage building? What do I do? Sympathetic to that, came up with a solution of sort of creating this maintenance structure allowance. Let me show you where that language ended up. Under 403H. Any chance that's still up? No, of course not. I scroll back to it. No, it's not far. So just as a reminder, you know, the bulk of your conversation was about how big should it be? How many should people be allowed? How tall should it be allowed to be? Should people be able to have 12 of them? No, I went too far. Oh. Huh, I put these out of order. 403H was actually before that graphic. Almost there. There it is. Maintenance structures. So this is unique to the GD3 form-based code district. So maintenance structures as defined herein may exist as the sole structure on a lot without meeting the street dimensional and architectural standards. So those are the things we just looked at for the chart that says where they have to be, what are the design standards for windows and whatnot. Maintenance structures shall be clearly intended to service a recreational amenity or a maintenance storage function on the site. My last set of notes has this 3,000 square foot limit in here. I think I brought to you guys 1,500, but you told me 3,000, so I just wanted on the record that it was you who said 3,000.
Yeah, they have an opportunity to build. Yeah. I
And that's
remember.
3,000 gross square feet.
Yeah,
So if it's a two-story structure, it's 1,500 square foot footprint.
yeah.
So I want to confirm with you while you're here, because that's what all my notes and the minutes say.
Yeah.
The 3,000 was the number you intended, because it is not a staff number. Not that I'm against it, but this was the planning commission number.
Yeah, I was for it, definitely. It's a big piece of property. Have a real building, do it right. Yeah.
3,000? Okay,
Think so?
good. Glad to confirm that. 25 feet in height. I think we had started with a smaller number, but there was some discussion about bay doors and getting in taller things, and 25 feet is, I mean, probably should have started with that number anyway, because if Rich wants to build a 25-foot shed in his backyard right now, he can. So that's the limit on a residential accessory structure.
Yep.
So I guess it makes sense. So 25 feet in height. And the other hard point of discussion was how many? You settled on 3. I think my draft had 2. Property owners were like, no limit at all. And
Yeah.
if so, how about 6? And you said 3. Still okay with 3?
More than plenty.
Are you okay? You feel okay?
3?
Yeah.
More than plenty, right?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
I think so
Yeah.
too. I mean, 2 might have been enough, but 3's more than plenty.
So we're,
It's gonna be an industrial park.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, 3 gets you,
I thought it was gonna be
yeah, I mean, that's a lot for whole quadrant. And again, these are just things that exist on their own lot. It doesn't mean that you can't have more of them. But for them to be on their own lot and to not have to meet these, for them to be an exception,
Yeah.
this is how they have to exist. Okay? And then lastly, we had a long conversation about this, and I think the language that had changed from the last draft you saw was that I put shall be compatible. You directed me to change that to should be compatible, just so it's a little more flexible as far as building materials go. And we softened the language a bit.
That's okay. Definitely want to put a little, we don't want a tin shack. So whatever it takes.
So do you want it
to-
shall?
We definitely don't want a tin hole warehouse out there and do all
So this is softer language.
Yeah,
Aluminum, steel, and corrugated metal siding are discouraged. But it says may be prohibited by the DRB upon a finding that the structure is prominently visible. So if somebody's got this structure that's sort of like way back, tucked in against a tree line, not really visible, and they've got a nice sort of corrugated steel, I'm making that up, that's a real material, right? They could do that. But if it's like, this is the building that's going right up front on Roosevelt Highway, this gives the DRB the ability to say, no, this is prominently visible, this is not a material that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Does that seem like okay language? It's a little looser than some other language, but I think a DRB could read this pretty cleanly, and would feel comfortable with it.
I'd have shall, but.
You'd have shall.
I'm more of a control freak, so. You know that building on the corner that's like 3 stories now, right when you go through the light? Like that kind of took me back in terms of when we say kind of conforms or fits into the neighborhood. That it was like, I wonder how that was interpreted. You know, so that kind of just makes me a little concerned. That's all.
I get that.
Hmm?
I get that.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, I get that idea, believe me.
Okay.
Yeah. This would definitely, probably the first time we've done something like this, actually. I think, right? I don't think we have anything that says you shall or should or anything is what we want to look at, really. Form-based zoning tells you where the windows go and everything, but we never said any design review, anything.
There's some in the Lake District, the Lakeshore districts.
I don't think the Lakeshore tells anything, does it? We have,
It does.
is it specific?
It's, well, so it's a little more like this language that you're seeing.
Is
That
it?
it's, I would say the form-based code language, I mean, thinking about writing staff notes for a new building under
Yeah.
the form-based code, it's very much, does the window spacing align? Is there a mixture of materials? Yes, no. How many stories is it? What are the height of each story? It's very
Yeah.
check the box. Does it meet? Does it not meet?
Right.
There's not a lot of interpretation there. Or there's a little bit, but there's not a lot of room. Whereas this language, having a should here, compatibility, talking about example materials, that's something I think is a little more that you'll see in the Lakeshore districts where it's not, a full form-based code standard, but rather it's something that I think prompts an applicant to provide an elevation that they then justify to the board as meeting or not meet. Well, they don't, not justifying that it doesn't meet the standard, but
Yeah.
the board has to then, review something more than, other parts of town where you might be more flexible with what fits in that general box.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to tin shack. I definitely don't want to I want that DRB to be able to say, no, that's not going to fly. So if that wording you think provides that without shall, I'm on board. But I don't want the developer come in and say, I'm going to stick it on the corner over here, nobody's going to see it until all of a sudden we have to clear cut that whole spot. Now we're going to see that. It's already built. I don't think I want that. Maybe it's for the whole piece. I don't know.
You
I would
tell
say
me,
was-
I'm clearly good at following directions, so.
Yeah. I just don't know how.
Your direction last time was should,
Yeah, yeah.
but if you'd like to change it to shall, now's your time.
You know, I guess when we were taking public input, one of the things that seemed to run through that, I know we're not supposed to say the character, but I think especially along the lakeshore, people want to see something that looks familiar. Not something that, like you said, that just jumps out at you like, wow, that doesn't look like it kind of just fits in visually. So as long as the DRB would say something, but I don't know if Rick and you and the chair of the DRB talk about stuff, or if they ever come and say,
So these won't be on the lake shore, just as a reminder.
These
I know
won't
we-
be, okay.
I know we talked about it as an example, but this is
Okay.
in the GD3 Farm-Based
Okay.
Code Growth Center
Yeah.
area.
okay,
So this
straight up
is,
for the new piece and the piece that they're building now. I don't know, I think I'm kind of changing my philosophy, especially since I see the new 1/3 size buildings in the back, and things seem to be changing easily. But I don't want to see a shed, I just don't want to see a tin shack. I don't want to hear about, I'd rather hear about, it looks nice 20 years from now than, how did that 3-story building get slapped up there in a brand new, we have a brand new area. I think it should be done, I think we can do better. That's my deal.
I mean,
Not only it costs any more, a few bucks compared to, you know what I
no,
mean?
but I mean, I don't think anybody's really like gonna stick just a plain shed on there, you know what I mean?
I would like to say not, but
yeah, I would like
unfortunately,
to say not to.
I don't
but-
have that kind of feeling anymore. I think I've changed on that.
Yeah,
I see
yeah, I mean, I'm
I
trying to
see-
think.
what we have out there, sometimes it's just, it's a little easy to say, if I can just do this, save a few dollars, I'll move on. Even though you could have spent 50 cents more and made it, at least.
I think that,
thank you.
if anything, I think steel is gonna be,
I mean, I'm not against
Yeah,
steel, what I'm
yeah.
against is the idea that this building is gonna match the structures of what we're putting out. Supposedly, when they were here, remember, they were all about, this is a village look, right? And then all of a sudden, because downtown, everybody was about the village look, right? And then all of a sudden over here, now we have the modern day look over here. You know, it changed. It changed from what everybody thought was being a village, now we have a modern day property. So if you want to build a modern day property, build a modern day shed or workshop to make sure it looks decent and it's taken care of properly. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And the difference, to really drop the hammer on that, is we go from should to it to you shall do it.
And so,
but then you're restricting the material if you write shall, you know what I mean?
They could already use the material they're using for everything else. Yeah, you're right, you are restricting it.
I mean, that's
You're
literally
making
like-
it.
You're making it very specific that they cannot
Yeah.
use those materials, even though, like, I mean, that's kind of the case-by-case DRB decision.
Yeah, they have to make it match somehow.
yeah, and I think you had reviewed, or maybe an member of the public, developer might have provided you an example elevation of a maintenance building that they had proposed in a different municipality. But I think, thinking through the logistics of how some of these larger developments with private infrastructure, private roadways, there might be looking to apply for things like a small salt shed or something.
You're right.
Which, could be, they might not put, cement fiber board on the side of it.
Yeah.
You know, you see something
so-
like this, do you want, Rich, are you thinking something like
That's
this?
exactly what I don't want up there, right. There's no, that's perfect.
And
It's
this
a
is
great
under
utility.
3,000 square feet, under,
Yeah, that would make all criteria, but the problem is, that building does not belong in the new growth center. Now, there you go, see, there you go, right on the end. You got a salt shed there, you've got just enough to make it,
On the right?
yeah, all the way to the
Yeah,
right.
I like that, that would fit in
Yeah.
there.
see, that's the
Yeah.
same material, just a nicer color.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
I
Yeah.
think it's,
And I
maybe
think,
changing the wording to a prefab style or something like that, just to kind of like, or adding something in, because restricting material is gonna be,
They're not restricting material as,
where the wording
They're-
kinda is, if you change it from should to shall.
they shall make it, run that line by us again?
Yeah, because if you read it, if you change that wording, you're not gonna, you won't be able to, you're literally excluding the material out from being used to build it. I think that's why it got changed to should in the first place.
and I think that was I think that was kind of what Rebecca was trying to get at, like, like here's something that would fit.
Yeah.
Like that there are those materials that can work and can be nice. Like I can't even tell looking at this if this is wood or metal.
That's the same building though, they just doors are on a gabled end versus like the, side end of it. I mean, that's pretty much.
That's nice.
Yep.
That's really nice. You wanted to see the language?
Yeah. Yeah, just
Can you
want-
say that it conforms somewhat to the architectural look of surrounding
Well,
buildings?
that's what, number 4, it says maintenance structures
Oh, who do we
should
need?
be compatible.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. To adjacent building material, color, and design, aluminum, steel, corrugated metal sidings are discouraged, may be prohibited by the Development Review Board upon finding the structure prominently visible on roadway. So, I mean, it's kind of, if you change it to shall, I mean, I think you're kind of making it,
I don't know about the, yeah, the metal building siding thing isn't the problem. It's making sure that it's compatible. Maybe we eliminate the
So yeah,
whole.
shall does elevate the game
Yeah,
a lot.
but we don't need to have them not use the whole aluminum, steel, corrugated metal siding, that line right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's as important.
yeah.
You can use that and still have the building look nice.
Yeah.
Right, and be compatible to what
Right.
is
I
there
think-
already.
Yeah, I think we're looking more for compatible than material.
Okay, so I can't edit this one in front of me, but let me try to think this through, because if you are gonna warn this tonight, I want you to have language.
Right.
So, maintenance structures shall be compatible to adjacent buildings in material, color, and design. And then maybe strip,
Yep.
I wouldn't strip the whole sentence. Maybe you can say, you could say the Development Review Board could impose additional standards where buildings are predominantly visible to a roadway.
I think as long as it says shall be compatible.
You wanna
that-
stop
that's
there?
That's pretty clear to me.
Did you have thoughts?
Well, one thought is that, there's different building design standards based on where the lot is on a certain street. So I'm wondering if you want to reference that clearly and just say that, if you're on an A street, there's an expectation that your roof line is flat, and maybe this building should have a similar roof line to, there's certain standards, there's certain, there was some on one of those photos, sort of like an awning over the
Yeah.
garage doors, and if that's a requirement on an A street, having some guidance for the DRB to look at that might be useful. Similar standards. Not necessarily that they have to meet all the standards, because that's not the intent, but
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
compatibility with the relevant standard.
Yeah, whatever street that goes on, it should match. It definitely should blend in.
Mhm.
I guess I'm getting more,
All right.
more,
I love that.
more like, less flexible on.
You're gonna have to
Visually.
take it up with Rebecca when she comes
Yeah,
back.
I know, right?
Well, let's
Right.
pass it tonight.
All right, hang on, I'll make this bigger in a minute. I'm just trying to type up so you can see this.
And we give you a nice square footage of building. We give you the height. We allow you to have 3.
I like
And you-
compatible, I like that.
Yeah, and
you
in
know,
return, all we
that
ask is that
it
it
shall be compatible.
has a nice look to it.
Shall be compatible to design standards of the buildings in the quadrant or something like that.
Well, if it was gonna do that, we wouldn't have to write this at all, right? Because
Yeah.
The shed's not allowed.
a
right?
shed's allowed, it just has to meet the standards for
Of the
principal
3,000.
buildings. So this is supposed to be like a lighter version of it, so it doesn't have to be it completely.
Right?
Let me make this
I would
bigger.
like to say we'd have a lighter version, and I get that part.
That
I just
visible.
don't want to see us, I don't know. I don't think I still don't think I want free range. Unless the DRB can say, nope, this is what our thoughts would be.
Okay, so we at least like this. The question now is, do we want more?
No, I'm not looking to, no, I personally, am not looking to get them all into colors and all that.
No, no.
I just want it to be compatible.
Do you like that sentence, though?
Yeah,
Yeah? See, I like that sentence.
I do too.
Yeah.
So you think it's good in its simplicity?
Yeah.
You don't want to
Yeah.
keep any of that second one. Talk about materials at all.
I don't think so, right?
Yeah, I don't think we need to
It-
list it in there, because I
Yeah.
think it creates confusion on like
Yeah,
Right.
what, could be and can't be used.
Okay.
yeah, they can build a hardcore
Do you
building.
want to give any extra authority to the Development Review Board? Do you want to speak to roadways either by type or visibility?
I don't think so, because I think it's a separate building, so it doesn't really need to meet like the same setbacks and all that other stuff. It's on that.
I mean, I think you might be right. That one sentence might just do it.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I will flag you real quick and say, hey, we got an emergency update.
There you go.
So just as the staff to the Development Review Board.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
it's
that's very
great
important.
to be sitting here with you tonight to understand the intent, because sometimes,
Yeah.
years down the line, there's a question of, man, what were we thinking? Well, I've already copied that line. But I think the question is, the second section that starts with aluminum, steel, and corrugated metal siding are discouraged, adds some context. And I just want to caution from having no context, because, it could be years before the Development Review Board sees a proposal for an accessory maintenance building.
Right,
And if it has corrugated metal siding, because this is a very modern development that's being proposed, I don't know that. I just don't want your intent to get lost.
I'm not opposed to losing the whole steel siding and corrugated thing. I'm more into this line right here.
The
That-
building matches the,
Matches what
Yeah.
we're building around it.
All right.
yep.
But I get what, I like that. I also get what Zach is saying. So he's sitting with the DRB, and we're gonna solve part of this by adding lots of extra context in the minutes. And part of it, so we have a DRB who's like, we see this building come in. And it might not be so, I showed you very clear examples of nice and clear examples of not so nice, but there's probably a lot in between. And they're like, or even staff first, even before it gets to the
Right.
DRB, staff is looking
Sure.
at this and we're like, we have to make a recommendation, right? And Zach's like, Kathy, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know, Zach, what do you think?
Somebody brings you a design idea for a blue building to go into the,
Yeah.
with,
So we're like, okay, with luck, there's other buildings already built. So that's gonna be key, because then we have adjacent buildings to compare to. And I think that'll be the case. But hopefully, because maybe that's just a no. If the first building is this building, it's an obvious no, because it's not, it doesn't meet the standard. It's not compatible to adjacent buildings. There's no adjacent buildings.
That's right.
So that's a no. Can't have it. I'm just thinking through, I'm
what
thinking out
about-
loud.
What about if can't you have 3 separate buildings on its own lot, so therefore they wouldn't have to follow this at all? Because you said you can have up to 3 maintenance buildings on its own separate lot, essentially.
Right.
So then all they have to be is look alike. There's no restrictions on what they would look like, period.
Well, we could
No.
change that to adjacent principal buildings,
Right,
Okay.
yeah, that's still,
if you're concerned about that loophole.
yeah, that still stands.
Material, color, and design. So the good thing is,
But when you say compatible, it's not like exact. It's just that it's not, like, it doesn't stick out like, whoa.
not
How does that
vastly,
fit in here? So compatible, I don't know how you define compatible, but that, I think that'd be interesting to me to see how the DRB kind of looks at how the structures now and figures out if that's compatible.
it's tough. It's tough, but I mean, some things are very obvious, right? So if you have, the majority of your buildings are entirely brick or, wood siding or, of some sort of, you know, look at Sunderland right now, they're all sort of a dark wood and a dark metal aesthetic. And all of a sudden, we get a blue corrugated metal siding.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that it's not matching in color, it's not matching in material.
But it doesn't have to match. It just has
Or
to
it's
be
not
compatible.
complementary,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, when I drive around some developments in other towns now, I'm just like blown away about how every block there's a different design, a different style, different materials. There's like no cohesion, you know, to the, and just for me, that I just don't like that, you know, that everything is different. You know, I like some kind of conformity, a little bit.
Yeah. And like, you know, conversely, I think there's a new trash enclosure, and I know that's not really what we're talking about here, but I think there's a new trash enclosure over at one of the sort of nicer materials. No? Am I imagining this? Is it really not
Sorry,
nice?
a nice trash enclosure.
It exists.
Yes, so not Sunderland, sorry. Severance Corners Village Center did permit and build some newer, nicer trash enclosures.
Nicer.
They're
They have a roof.
a unified sort of treatment with some nice vinyl fencing rather than the chain link
That's a
with
vast
the
improvement.
plastic in it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's maybe your example of, if those were wanted to be on their own lot, and they're not. These are like sitting in parking areas, but if they came in and said, we have the central trash area, and it's gonna be this one big building, or big trash area, with all of our trash collection, and we're gonna put it in this building, or not even this building, but it's gonna be this chain link fence. Obviously, this chain link fenced area is not matching or compatible with the rest of the materials, but if they're cement siding, and the cement siding is, you know, or white vinyl and sort of a white material treatment on some of the buildings, I think the board can figure it out.
I think the developers can figure it out myself, and should bring you the right thing, is my opinion. And I think when you see it's not right, and the board sees it not right, they're gonna say it's not right. But I'm assuming we're all on the same page, as they said, they want it nice, so let's make it nice, but I think I'd rather see it, reading it just like that right there, so I know, at least,
Make a note to look back in a minute.
we're paying attention.
The
Maybe
other-
it's just simple as saying we're paying attention, and that's how we're paying attention.
The other good thing is, nobody's taken this particular section to the Supreme Court. Like,
No.
nobody's gonna appeal over
No.
what their maintenance shed looks like, so.
That's right. They'll be happy to do something
Probably
nice.
shouldn't say that on record.
No, I mean, well, knock on some wood maybe, but no, but also, you know, I think on the alternative end, I don't want the commission to set the board up to be like, you know, down the line, 20 years, you're like,
Right.
who approved that blue, you know,
Yeah,
prefab structure?
right.
And I think, you know, what I've taken notes of here, basically, I think you're wanting the board to say, what's already out there? What's the roof pitch? What are the siding materials? Does this match? Is this kind of a scaled down version of it? Those are sort of the guiding questions you're.
But it's not match compatible, you know, because match to me is like, it's exactly the same. Compatible is,
But to do match also, I mean, you're building a maintenance building versus like a residential, you know what I mean? Two separate purposes for the structures, so I mean, you can't make them look the same.
yeah,
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
you don't need 20 windows in a maintenance building, you know what I mean,
Right.
from the road to make
Right.
it look, I mean, it's just kind of,
But it
Yeah.
has to look like it
Yeah.
belongs there,
yeah.
and it's part of the show.
yeah.
Do you want, I've heard you guys mention this a couple times. Do you want language that says new prefab structures?
But again, that's, you can make something look like a prefab instead of ordering it. I mean, that's
Right, but at
really-
least it requires you to put, I don't know, I'm just asking. You can say no. It's just you've mentioned it a few times,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think
seems to be something you take issue with.
I don't think a prefab's a problem, again. I think you can
No?
do the right thing with a prefab, as long as
Yeah.
it makes it within that sentence. put a prefab up and pretty it up the right spots, you're good to go. The problem is don't put a prefab up and it looks like, we got a cement structure up there and
The
it's
first blue one I showed you.
shot all blue with nice white doors. Nothing. I would think that would get us where we want to be.
I do too.
I mean, that thing right there on the end is probably prefab.
This thing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I like it. It kind of would fit in there.
exactly.
Yeah, but change it to blue, are you gonna like it? No.
No, I'm not.
No,
Well,
Because
but
there's no blue up there.
So we talked about prohibiting prefab, but are we going to prohibit blue?
yeah.
No blue.
The
No
logical
blue.
next step? We've kind of talked about it a lot.
it's my fault.
They'll paint the next building, we'll put it up all blue.
This is like the world's worst Google search. They keep showing me insides of
You gotta search barn dominium.
barn dominium. Is that a thing?
Yes.
Well, that's
Oh,
more of a
I'm-
dwelling, right?
Yeah,
But the garages are
The
bigger.
structure is basically, yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it came up so fast.
yeah.
Barn dominium. What?
yeah, there you go.
So you would build a house with a garage, and a lot of times the garage is bigger than the house, or
Yeah,
you live in a garage.
Whoa. Look at that. I'm the planner and I had no idea. Barn dominium. I'm sure that's aspirational for some folks. Okay. Barn
We're good?
dominium.
Good, I'm fine.
we're
I
fine.
love
We're
that.
good.
Yep.
Whoa, that is something right there. I'm gonna leave you with that one.
Yeah, that's a beauty. That's not gonna pass. I don't care if- what color they
3,000 a
paint.
month right there.
Yeah,
I mean, some of these, materials make all the difference.
oh, yeah.
It's, that's
That's-
something.
And that's, but majority of them are metal siding. so
Like
they're
that,
basically
I
kind of-
wouldn't think is compatible.
No,
That's,
that-
that's for your plane.
Yeah, that's for your
You're
planes.
parking a plane in there, not a car.
Yep.
All right, let's move on. Now I've learned something new tonight, thank you. Okay, so you want that language.
Yes.
It's going in a warning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Rich is gonna call Rebecca.
No, no.
All right, and then lastly, I think this gets to addressing some of it. These structures, no matter how nice they look, should not be located between the street line and the front building line of a principal building. Which talks about sort of their dominance on the lot. And shall be located a minimum of 15 feet from all lot lines, so don't be sticking them right up on the street front, and at the property's edge. Sound fair?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Okay. Oops. Back over here. Zach, you got the language? Yes. Okay. External PUD setback waivers. Quick reminder here. The DRB currently has the authority to set a bunch of waivers for PUDs. Pretty picture, as a reminder, they can set waivers for internal to a PUD between houses. They do not have explicit authority right now to set waivers at the edge of a PUD. Commercial or residential, if you are on a PUD, they cannot reduce those setbacks. So we talked about this, you're like, oh, well, seems like there's some cases where that might make sense. So, we talked through what those cases are that do make sense. This is now visible in, bear with me, it doesn't like me to open up these two things at the same time. 907. I don't know why it doesn't let me open them. Put my eyes on. Show you the language. So let me make this bigger. You'll see this under miscellaneous, tiny things that we did. 907 was, the table had some weird numbering. I renamed it 9-1. And then within the table, I gave everything a letter. That way, when Zach is writing a DRB decision, he wants to refer to something in here, he now has a letter to refer to it as. So that's a minor modification. Under minor modifications, the other things we did, there were holdovers to the size of PUDs for 3 acres, but it's all 1.5 acres. So that's why you see other red lines in there. But getting back to the setbacks, external PUDs. So when does it make sense? So you'll see now F, G, and H. F being side or rear for residential. Development Review Board may at its discretion. So PUDs, everything about a PUD is at its discretion, right? So nothing is a given. The board is allowed to discuss things when it comes to waivers. Give a side or rear setback up to 50%, but no less than 10 feet. So you still can't plop things on property lines. So how are they governing that? So they have to determine whether or not that reduction is creating any undue adverse impacts on adjacent properties and natural resources. By reducing that setback, are they really having an impact on the adjacent property, especially if they're non-compatible uses? Or it's an infill project, for example, and reducing that setback is now going to, for example, a trucking facility. You're reducing that setback, and now that trucking facility is now 10 feet off the property line from a house, a single house, or a daycare facility, or a church, or something that enjoys quiet. Is that going to have an adverse impact on that use? Or maybe that is an empty lot, or it's another high-intensity use, and that 10 feet's not going to make a big difference. Maybe it's a trucking facility next to a storage facility lot, and they're all happy to have lots of activity. But the DRB will consider that because there is a difference in what that PUD setback reduction might make. Same thing with open spaces and buffers. If that's next to an open space that would adversely be impacted by reducing that. Mm-hmm. So that's at the DRB's discretion. That's for side or rear. Oh, that's for residential, I'm sorry. I was just giving examples of non-residential, but same thing applies really. Again, the same thing. If you have an infill, large lot residential PUD, especially a really dense one, and its potential to create, by reducing that buffer, they may say, let's keep that buffer. That buffer is going to be important to what's already existing. Again, that's an increase. It's not, that would be a waiver to reduce something. It's not like you're penalizing them. You're just not giving them extra.
Yeah. And people moving into these areas know there's industry there, right? I mean, they're aware that they're moving into an it's a.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's the opposite way around. So, I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do move into industrial areas, and sometimes the people are there long before the industry comes.
Interesting.
We see both.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's no industry. I mean, there are people who live in a single unit dwelling who think that a duplex next to them is the end of the world. The traffic, what are we gonna do? My kids are gonna be run over, because 2 new houses have been built on the same road as them. We hear it.
Yeah.
So it's all different perspectives. And then external setbacks front. So this is where you're on a road. So when is it appropriate to reduce a setback on the road? So again, we talked about this. We don't want to reduce the front setback at the road if the road is likely to be widened, because that space may be needed if that road is ever going to get bigger. You want to make sure that there's sufficient road width in the right-of-way for a sidewalk. We talked about this earlier. Because if there's not, and that needs to go in that setback on the private property, you don't want to stick a building there.
Right.
You don't want to reduce that and put a building there.
Or a multi-use path,
Right.
hopefully that biking and walking will increase, and
But some
so-
sort of pedestrian facility,
Yeah.
so, so if you have a commercial building, they want to be right up against the road, but that's the only place that you were ever going to get that path, you don't want to preclude that.
Right,
Or
I don't. I'm
tree
just
planting
gonna
or
say
something
I
like
don't.
that.
yeah.
But it might be an area where there already is a sidewalk or a path,
Mm-hmm.
and that road's never going to get widened, and there's plenty of trees. And that 50-foot setback is not doing anything other than creating dead space.
Yep.
There might not be any harm in moving that building a little closer. But this is going to be for the board to think about, and they'll use these standards to help them. And because they're not experts and we're not experts, bullet 4 says, consult with the Public Works Director, especially if they're looking at certain roadways. 2.05B is like some of the main roadways, Mounts Bay Ave, Blakely, some of the more traveled roadways that could potentially be widened. They have an increased minimum front setback.
I think as long as there's always an option to put in biking or walking, safe walking or biking or a combined path. Because I do think people are going to want that in the future. I really do. This kind of walking or biking or kind of connection.
And even if it takes 20 years, we don't want to preclude it
Right.
by having a building there
Right.
that'll
And
last
I'm
for
just
100
speaking
years.
for myself, so I just do see that as a real benefit for health, for the environment, and just for community, for building community.
So I think that this will allow that. And this is more than they have now, just to be clear, this is not limiting anything, it's actually creating more, but with guardrails. So nothing new here. You've seen all this before. You just didn't see it in its place. Now you see it in its home.
Looks good.
Okay?
Yep.
I actually think the next thing might be real close here, so I'm just gonna, yep. Buffer requirements, okay, so that was reducing your setback. I don't know why it thinks I formatted things into Portuguese. I'll have to fix that. Did you do that?
No, that happens every time I write the staff notes for DRB. So that is an IT issue for the town.
Okay,
Except it pops up French sometimes for me.
French sometimes. Okay. So that's a setback waiver. Okay, but within that setback, we have standards for buffering. We only have standards right now for buffering in residential PUDs. We have no buffers, interestingly enough, for commercial PUDs. Weird. Probably an oversight because residential PUDs were the PUDs for a long time. And they probably just didn't get copied over to commercial PUDs. So basically what this does is say, hey, there's also buffers for non-residential areas. So not just in residential districts, there's also buffers in non-residential districts. So they kind of look a whole lot like the other ones. There's nothing crazy or inventive here. There is some sort of language that you'll see about residential, non-residential PUDs adjacent to residential districts or uses. So where you have two sort of different uses, which we tried not to have happen, but does exist in some places in Colchester. this calls for an increased buffer between those two uses. So right now, we have buffers between residential and residential. And there might be some sense in having some buffering between commercial and commercial, but it seems to make the most sense to have the most buffering between commercial and residential,
Yeah.
because they are the most different amongst each other. So this creates, it gives the board the authority to sort of look at it, weigh it, say, yep, you have to have this buffer. And in some cases, maybe a few trees isn't enough. We also want to see fencing, or a denser line of trees. And also, don't put lighting right there at a residential property line if you're a commercial property. Try to bring it into your property. Unless it's required to meet a safety standard, because safety still comes first. So, again, all language you saw, just now you're seeing it in place. Nothing new. Didn't add anything. Sound good?
Yep.
Sorry, I think this is actually faster than going back to my memo. Maybe not. I think it might actually be on to definitions now?
No, we got the landscape budget requirement.
Oh, new.
1004.
Oh, I'm so close. 10:04. Okay, this one's new, but very well intentioned. Almost there, I think. Unless 10:03 is really long. It is.
1003 is very short.
10:02 is
But
long.
1001 and 1002 were not short.
Oh, they're so long. Okay, I'm almost there. I could scroll, but I don't have a mouse. 10:04. 10:04. So close. There we are. Okay. Landscaping. Okay. Quick and to the point. Right now, when you build anything under site plan requirements, we take your construction costs, no matter what they are, 50,000, 10 million, and we say, take 3% of that and give it to us in landscaping. Well, not us, put it on site. 3%, no matter what the number is, 3%. And it's not really a big number if you have a small project, but you have a really expensive project because you're doing high-end materials or it's a big project. That number can be really, really high. A lot of communities around us, at least two that I'm aware of, some communities don't have a budget requirement at all. I once did the research on this. They put in layers for this so that you're getting a fair amount up front for average construction costs, and then it'll start to taper off. I've sort of had this on my to-do list to bring to you guys for a while, but it sort of got pushed up a little by a recent project. This would apply to everybody, not a recent project that's talking about it. I'm not going to name the recent project. But we have had somebody make a, who's asked to talk to you about it. I guess it would come to you, so I guess I could name it. Who's asking to sort of follow that sort of tier, but just so you know, I was thinking about talking to you guys about it anyway. So the way that that would work is that 3% still applies to some first tier. What I'm proposing here is the first $250,000 of construction, $250,000 of construction or improvement costs. And then after that, it would go down to 2% for the next $250,000. And then everything after that is just 1%. So that that landscaping budget is not, because we have seen very high landscaping budgets.
250,000, 500,000, and 500 and off, 1%.
So possibilities are to say, absolutely not, let's stick with 3% for everything. You could change those tiers to be higher or lower. Or you could say, love it, Kathy, go.
And it's, those plans are submitted, do we have it looked like it's submitted to a landscape architect or a designer.
Yep, so they have to be submitted by a professional landscape architect
Okay.
or a professional.
Yeah.
And so they give us a budget. I also added in here, because I don't think I showed you this. Are you reading it now? The board has some ability to give credit for other things. So it does say for trees. Is that what it says? Renewal planting costs, right? And that they can give some credit for some existing tree planting. That's existing language, as long as the objectives are not reduced. The board has historically given some credit for some other things that contribute to that, but it's never been codified. It's sort of just a practice. So I've attempted to sort of codify that in here. That says that things that support that, because it's sort of been their practice. Again, these are things that you could say absolutely not. If we're going to reduce this, it's trees and trees alone. But it's kind of standard practice as long as we're supporting the idea of creating extra spaces that are supported around these green spaces. So what you might commonly see is like a, waterscape feature, or, like a fountain, or something like that. Benches that are in a garden. Anything that's come to mind that you've seen recently?
I've seen like kind of common patio areas with supporting benches or
Yeah.
things like that come to mind as
I wouldn't count furniture in this.
So like what we don't see is like part of a parking lot, or a smoking patio or something like that. But if it's like a highly landscaped like workplace employee lunch area, or like a school is doing a little nook
Yeah.
outside that might also come with a few benches for the kids or staff to sit on. Like that's all part of the feature.
So this is for commercial, Act 250 doesn't matter.
No,
So
this is
this
anything
is-
that would require a site plan, so usually commercial, but
Right.
not necessarily,
This doesn't,
but usually commercial.
okay. So this has been required for residential? No. Not unless
Like a
it's develop-
residential building
Right.
would require this, yeah, so like the Sunderland Woods buildings,
Yeah, commercial style
or
structure.
not Sunderland Woods, Sunderland, would
Sunderland
require
Farms, yeah.
this.
So
So
it's
like-
anything that requires site plan review, which is generally excludes single units, duplexes, renovations,
Yeah.
and some minor site work.
Yeah.
So a lot of items go to the board and may be subject to this requirement. Additionally, one thing that comes to mind are seawalls,
Yeah.
since those go to the board. But usually there's plantings associated with those.
So you might also see community gardens, which are not plantings, but they're like the supporting structures. I don't know, I'm kind of making that up, but
It is a request. I don't think the community gardens ever cost enough to really help out the budget.
true.
But
So is the goal to provide like some screening, or
I think it's
is
to
it just
provide
a
greenery.
greenery?
Greenery and non-paved space, non-like parking lot space,
So when someone takes down a lot of trees to build the envelope for a building, are they required to replace that percentage of trees? No.
I think if you-
Required just for spend
if you
3%.
If you clear cut a lot, you're usually gotta pay per tree when you clear cut them, I think, to the state.
But not replace the trees?
I don't know, there's some rule on that. If you're clear cutting a site, you gotta,
I'm not not aware of that, but
So when they built, our growth center, so when we do this, they build their building, it goes, this 3% we're asking, every time they build a building, 3%.
Hmm.
Your new building's 3%. So if we break it down, these buildings, which are way over this $250,000 ask,
some people meet it easy. Some people struggle. Some people struggle so bad that they start to pick out very expensive species because the spaces are tight. So they're starting to pick out trees that cost more exotic.
Where did the dollar amount come from? And how is it gonna be effective in the future? You know what I mean? Having $250,000, you know what I mean? By changing the regulation, shouldn't it be like a percentage of, construction cost? So percentage of, percentage of a percentage, I guess. Because 10 years from now, 250,000 might be, you know.
If you want to complicate it, yes.
Just saying, you know.
It's true. 250,000 now is not the same as
Yeah.
250,000 later. It's true.
when does that kick? When do they have to do that? So we're watching building happening right now, right?
The
The
plantings
first
have to
building
be
up there
in.
was the blue building. Where did they haven't planted anything up there yet, right?
They have to be in before they get a CO.
Before they get a CO, it should be done. If they don't
They
get a
have
CO,
not requested a CO.
right,
Which building were you talking about?
the blue one.
Blue one.
Champlain Housing.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
That one does have a CO. They did install their landscaping. And actually, so we require landscape improvement agreements, which
Yeah.
include a 2-year warranty period. And they had not great luck with survival of a certain fern species, so they had to come back to the DRB and asked for,
Yeah.
a modification as well, which,
Yeah.
the DRB was very understanding of.
Yeah.
But they do have their landscape.
So they did meet up. But more recently you have, and at first like I said, I wasn't gonna tell you this, but I think they were gonna come to you anyway, so it's public information. The school district is looking at, they bonded, where they got a vote for multi-million, over 100 million? No, not that high.
No, can't remember.
Whatever it was.
Yeah, it was
They're
substantial.
looking at significant improvements.
Yeah.
So same thing, not just residential, so, especially for renovations. They've got, it's the construction costs, so where's all that going? And 3% of $10 million, it's a lot of money. Again, I don't bring this to you because of, it's the school. This is something that's been on my whiteboard.
Yeah,
I really like the idea of landscaping.
We did the tier, just for full disclosure, the tier approach is exactly the language that we had in South Burlington. And the 250,000 is the tiers that we had there. So that's why I kind of picked them, just because I'm familiar with them. But it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
250,000. They were just comfortable numbers that we got used to. But certainly 250,000 that I worked with 10 years ago is not the same 250,000.
So we could put a percent.
You could put a percent. I would encourage you not to overcomplicate it just because everybody's trying to read these and use them. I'd rather you look at this every 10 years and readjust it
Okay.
than to, if you think 250,000 is not the right number, say 300,000. And then 10 years from now, change it to 400,000. But just to keep it simpler. So much of what we deal with is so complicated.
yeah. How much, I don't even know if you could tell me that, I realize it's kind of abstract, but say McGillicuddy's where it sits. You know what that building was and how much it had to cough up for this? Or
Probably
give me any
you
any building, I don't
anything
care which
that you
building,
can
one of the
think of more
buildings.
recently?
Just so I have a,
Well, not everybody tells us the truth.
sure.
And I would say There are people who tell us that, because their permit fees are also based on the cost of construction.
Sure.
And there are people that we know are telling us that their building cost $1 million. No, it didn't. It absolutely did not. And some people are very honest, maybe too honest, because we're like, that really costs that much? And they pay a lot of money in landscaping and permit fees that they probably could have told us the value was half that, and we wouldn't have blinked an eye. So it's kind of hard to say. Oh, good call, look in there.
I'm looking at a spreadsheet of the money that the town is holding in escrow for a variety of projects related to landscaping, but some public improvements. Generally, I think it's somewhere, a higher end. I've seen, anyway, it's really anywhere between, 5,000 for some smaller projects and probably a couple tens of thousands for larger projects. And that really can scale up depending on how expensive that project is.
Right.
Yeah. And again, like Kathy Ann said, it's really as honest as people are with us. Because, I think just projects can cost a variety.
Yeah, the renovations, I guess that was a regular permit, right? Did they have to do landscaping at this Cavalry, 10th Cavalry?
They got credit for the preservation of some pretty old trees.
Okay.
But they did do foundation plantings.
That was a very expensive project. The affordable housing at the fort. They were very honest with us as far as their construction costs. They far exceeded what we would have guessed.
Should clarify 2 recent buildings for the 2 smaller buildings that were recently permitted behind the 2 Ireland buildings. We have almost $150,000 in a letter of credit for landscaping for those buildings.
Per building or
That's
both?
both.
Both still, big number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's quite a bit of money.
There's a catch-22. Is it too much? Not enough? I don't know. Now you see Charlie Boys, they built that big old complex in front in Milton. And all that open space is just filled with a massive amount of trees, and all around his buildings is filled with a massive amount of shrubbery, because that's all mandated. He had to pay for everything. But it's a
And-
truck,
That was required by.
oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
100% required, all of it. Yeah. So I think that might have been too much for the structure that it was. So I get that part.
So does the DRB, I would imagine they have some flexibility, right? If the lot's full of trees, or has natural kind of landscaping, would they still have to put stuff in?
Yeah, so the requirement is calculated based on the construction cost. So
Mm.
that sets a number. And the DRB can grant credit for existing features that, are in alignment with the purpose of the landscaping section. So thinking about greenery, buffering, some stormwater infiltration. Those are just keywords. Generally, the DRBs, looked for information on the, number of existing trees, the value to replace those trees. And some applicants conserving a larger area will do like a survey and, plot out some areas to estimate the value and work with a landscape architect to get a value. And that's a clear time where the DRB has some latitude, but when applicants come in and request, hey, can I count the gravel wetland? Can I count the trash containers, the trash enclosure? How about lights? It really starts to get a little bit out of the,
Yeah.
you know.
So the
out of control.
purpose of this is to screen things or just to make it a more aesthetically pleasing? Is that to soften it, maybe?
I think soften's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see a lot of sites that can be very sterile without this requirement. We have a recreational amenity requirement, but even that can be sort of a hardscape provision, so this is to sort of soften that and create sort of softer outdoor spaces.
I like the idea of it, but I just don't agree with the amounts, because I mean,
You don't agree with what? I'm
I
sorry.
think it's
How
gonna
much,
just
how
kill
much
How
the
much?
amounts?
the budget for greenery.
No, I think it ain't enough.
Projects.
Hmm?
Doesn't think it's enough.
'Cause I mean, you're
He doesn't
reducing
think
it
it's
down
enough?
greatly,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Oh, interesting.
3% on $1 million to like, 3% of 250, and then, I mean, you're, with the rising cost of everything, I think it's gonna be like, with these numbers, you're planting like 5 trees on a big construction project soon enough, because that's the cost of it. That's that. So,
Do you have different numbers you would
I would relook at
suggest?
that, what you guys see for permit applications, and maybe put a cap, you know what I mean, for, for construction, but I think that's gonna be just a huge reduction in, potential screening on a project, so,
It's a little tricky because
yeah.
we go down, where's buildings going down to what, they're not gonna add. They're not gonna say, oh, that wasn't quite enough money, let's put another 40 trees in there.
Yeah.
They're just gonna drop down to whatever money it is. It's $50,000, we're spending $50,000, not 50,001.
Hmm?
That's the tricky part. I don't know if it sounds simple enough, but I don't know. I don't know if we can, I personally don't know if we can jump on that tonight. That's my opinion.
You want to take it out?
I would say so, yeah.
Take it out?
Take it
Take the
out.
whole landscaping thing
Yeah.
out?
Leave it at 3% until the next time we have more time to discuss.
Yeah.
Oh, if we can discuss it, if we can table it.
That's what.
You want
I'll-
Table it?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's great, I don't know.
It'd be good to hear from Rebecca,
That's
I
fine.
think.
But yeah, I think we need to have like a couple of examples on, maybe not, with exact names of builders, but like, this is a project, this was the cost of it, just, and then kind of like maybe put a tier for construction dollar-wise, what percentage they're gonna be, or if the square, maybe like acreage of the site or building site, you know what I mean, or the size of the building. Something along those lines, because
So keep for discussion for the next supplement.
Yep, I think so.
I would like if somebody takes down a ton of trees, I'd like them to replace some of those trees. I mean, they will grow. I mean, in 50 years, they will be big trees.
All right, so I'm going to strip that. We'll take out that.
I really like that.
Okay, let's go back to the memo. Home businesses. This is one you guys talked about before, real quick. What you did here was to limit where they could be. 10.13B, I'll show you that language. Sorry. You did talk about this a lot, so I'll try not to kick that one too many times tonight. So basically, you said they're really not appropriate in large multi-unit structures. But that you could have them in detached single units Actually, I'll circle back to this real quick. This first part of this is that some of the home business language existed in the definition of home businesses, and some was in this section. I consolidated it. None of this is made up at the beginning of this. This just I pulled it out of the definition, moved it here, so that it's all in one handy place. Okay, so that's what you're seeing here, where it says automotive repair, automotive installation. You're like, God, we didn't talk about this. It was already in the regs, just not in this section, so that's why it looks like it's new. But 6 here is what you'd added. Home businesses may only be located in a detached single-unit dwelling or in a duplex or triplex row house-style unit. So if they're in a row house-style unit or with a shared wall, essentially, the Development Review Board could impose additional criteria to limit adverse impacts. So you talked at length about whether or not it's appropriate for people with shared walls, and you're like, oh, it could be. But if the board says, hey, you're operating this type of business that's going to be really noisy or have a lot of visitors, you have to put up a fence, or you have to put all your materials in a garage or something like that. You can still do it, but you have to do all this extra stuff because you share a wall with somebody. So that's where you left that.
Well, I just watched this program this weekend on noise, like just noise, about how people like had to leave their homes because of the noise of their neighbors. And I just wonder if like soundproofing, if it is going to be noisy, if requiring that they soundproof.
So again, this leaves it open to the DRB to require additional things. I mean, the other thing is we spent a lot of time talking about this, but home businesses are extremely rare in Colchester. I think Zach and I talked about this. We could think of one. So most people don't use them.
And Colchester, I think, I looked and saw that.
Home occupations.
We have a noise ordinance.
Are plentiful.
In Colchester, so I would think
Yeah.
that would cover.
Well, we don't have a noise ordinance. We have performance standards. But we don't have,
The planning doesn't, but I think the select board has, we have a I thought I looked it up and it said we have a noise, okay. We should. But that's another,
yeah, it's for a different body.
that's a different body, yeah.
A different body
Yeah,
that I don't need to write text for.
yeah.
Yeah, so home businesses, home occupation's very common, fairly common. We get fair amount of applications per year. But home businesses are sort of a niche and not many, so just keep that in mind as we kick this one a lot. Good with that?
Yep.
Nothing new there, except, again, you're seeing what I talked about before in relocating those other standards. I think that's it till we get to definitions now. I think I actually mean it this time. Nope, just kidding. Variances, that's another one where it just got moved. Variance standards. Existed in a part of the regulations under non-conforming structures. Oh, yeah, sorry. So variance standards come from state statute. We don't make them up ourselves. Some communities use them as a waiver tool. They're not supposed to. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. But variance standards are defined in state statute 24 VSA 4469. They exist in our regulations, but they're in the wrong spot. They exist under non-conforming structures. But technically, anybody can ask for a variance for anything, not just for a non-conforming structure. Again, pet peeve of mine. I'm relocating them because technically you can ask for a variance. A board can consider a variance, whether it's a non-conforming structure or not. So I've moved them out of that section into this section 11.12. No new language, no new text. It's in an area where it makes more sense. So, and every criteria that you see here under 1 all come from state statute. And just because we're talking about it, variances are extremely hard to get by design. Mostly the limiting thing for variances is number letter. B, is that the one? That basically says the property is otherwise non-buildable. And that's what it was intended for. So if you're living your best life, but you really want that shed and it's just killing you, that we will not approve it, you don't meet this. You're already failing because your property already has a house on it. B is gonna be the one, 99% of cases, that does not enable you to have a variance. Not to say that they're never applicable here, but very unlikely. And then you have to meet all of these, all 5, in order to get a variance. It's not an or, it's an and. So that's what's made clear here. But all I'm asking you to do is not reinvent the wheel, just say, it's okay that you put it in a different spot here, Kathy. So that's what that is.
That works.
Not sneaking anything in, just moving it. I think there was some variant stuff that also existed in the definition, but I don't think I touched it. Definitions. Let's see. Footprint. We talked about this one a long time ago. It was pretty easy. As per the staff notes, footprint only existed in the shoreland section, but it needed to be, and building footprint specifically talked about a final plot plan. I don't know why it was very specific to a final plot plan. It made no sense, so we deleted that whole thing and replaced it just with footprint, which I'll get to in a moment here. So that we don't have 2 competing footprints, confusing people. Now there's only 1 footprint. So again, not just the shoreland, but it does say also for shoreland, so you talked about all this before, nothing new here. It was one of the first things you guys agreed to for this update. Moving on. Home business, again, because I moved these standards, they look like they're deleted here, but it's just that they got moved. Okay?
Yep.
Are we looking at restaurant?
Okay.
Yep. I'm just making sure there's nothing in between.
Okay.
I think that's the next one. Restaurant. This one you guys talked about last time. Pretty simple, but has a big impact. Restaurants, as previously defined, very specifically said, no alcohol sales after 11 p.m. Not that we ever go around knocking on restaurants' doors after 11 saying, are you not serving alcohol anymore? But for some people who want to be very careful to follow the rules, they're very bothered by this. Liquor licenses for restaurants don't even limit you to 11, so I see no reason for our zoning to limit you to 11 for a restaurant. So all this does is remove that 11 PM limitation. It exists as far back as I can find a regulation. I think it's a throwback to well before I was born.
So just where it says, can have no substantial carryout, no substantial delivery services, how is substantial defined? Because could people be delivering alcohol like at 2 o'clock in the morning, drinks? Which
I think
I don't know if I have a problem with, I'm just curious.
I mean, that was already in there, so I wasn't trying to redefine the regulation except for what was asked for. I think I think what it's intended to mean is that a standard restaurant is not meant to be predominantly a takeout. Like it differentiates it from a Domino's,
Yeah.
where 99% of the business is people coming and going and not sitting down. A standard restaurant, for all of our purposes, is where people go and dine traditionally. They can have takeout, but that's not the bulk of their business. So,
But can they deliver drinks after 11? Takeout.
our definition doesn't care.
So anytime they could deliver drinks?
That's gonna be up to their liquor license, I think.
Okay.
But our definition's not gonna look at it.
Yeah. And the only other thing, I mean, I know it may not be that what we're talking about, where it says where food on the bar, if you go down to bar, on the second line, where food may be available for consumption, I'm just going to say, and we
Make
don't
it
need to
bigger.
do anything, but it concerns me that people could be drinking and not have food available. You know, I don't,
Under restaurant?
under bar.
Oh, way up to at bar.
It says an establishment for sale.
Oh, I mean, it wasn't the intent of what I was trying to do with this amendment, so.
I know.
I was trying not to
No,
go
it's-
down too many more rabbit holes.
Yeah, it's just concerning to me, because I
Yeah.
think if people are drinking, it helps if they're eating something. I mean, anything.
I imagine the liquor license probably
Would
has
probably
some.
take care of that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm not familiar with them. I don't issue them, but
yeah,
I'm sure people that are more knowledgeable about those things are governing it. And I don't think we permit, like, nobody comes in and says, I want to open a bar specifically. I'm not even aware of any, to be honest with you, so.
okay. It just,
Restaurants probably more forgiving for traffic and wastewater and,
yeah, sorry to take us
Yeah.
off, but I've just,
That's fine.
that concerns me.
yeah,
But we're all
Okay.
good with the 11 o'clock.
all good with 11.
I think we're good.
All right, is that, I'll go back to my memo in a second. But. I'm just gonna go back to the memo. I think that's it, other than wordsmithing. We talked about the minimum PUD size, accessory structures versus accessory buildings was just, clarify, I think some words were used interchangeably where they shouldn't have. A building is different than a structure, because some things are structures that are not buildings, obviously. Lot coverage versus building coverage, there was a part of table A2 where the wording got changed on one page. But it's actually different, but it should say one versus the other, but as the page changed, the word changed. I suppose you could say it's substantive, but I think it was the result of an error. So it's fixing that back. And then non-substantive changes, relocating, I think we talked about everything in here, table labels, numbers, everything there.
Yep.
Before you take any actions, I want to look, yeah, so, couple things I want to note to you before you even consider any actions. If you take a motion to warn a public hearing, you definitely want to choose the motion that I put in here, that where it says as amended, because we made quite a few amendments tonight. And just to summarize them all for you, we're going to drop 1004F. We're going to amend language related to the maintenance structures. There's part of the memo I'm going to amend, which Sarita pointed out a piece of my language, but that won't technically be in the warning. The other thing that has to get amended is any reference to the date. Your next meeting will actually be July 1st. I put July 2nd almost everywhere. So
That's
every motion you make has to be for July 1st. That doesn't have to stop us, but
Yep.
I put you, yeah, July 2nd. But it would be for July 1st. So you would also want to make sure that if you choose to make recommended motion 1 for the amendment and adoption report, that is also as amended, only because that references July 2nd. And it needs to say July 1st. Does that make sense? I just said a whole lot of things.
So we're looking, we just want the one, right? We're looking at this right, except when it's public warning.
So motion 1, I would recommend you say, if you want to,
Right,
accept the amendment and adoption report as drafted and amended this evening
okay,
to be included in the public warning and distributed accordingly,
okay,
because the amendment and adoption report does have the public hearing date on it.
Okay.
And then,
Do we need the date of this evening? Do we need to say what the date is?
if you want to, but you don't have to.
Okay.
You haven't in the past,
Okay.
but you can. And then motion 2, I would use the italicized part, and then change that part where it says warn for planning commission public hearing at 7 PM on July 1st. The proposed amendments to the Colchester development regulations, blah, 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 as reviewed and considered and amended this evening of June 3rd. Any
We
other
good
questions
with that?
before you?
think so?
Do you want to look
Okay
at
with
the
it?
amendment
You want
report?
me
Do
to make the first motion?
you want to look
All
at
set?
anything else?
All good? We feel comfortable?
I'm good. Do you want to see anything else?
I think I'm good.
Think
We're going to
all
have a
set?
quorum July 1st. I guess I should check on that before you warn anything.
Should we, yeah, I'm good.
Or at least 3 of you are going to be here.
Yeah. I'll
What
be
July
time is-
1st.
What time is the meeting?
7,
7.
July 1st.
7.
Yep, I'll be here.
It is a holiday week.
Yeah, it is a holiday week.
It's on the
Party
business
doesn't
end of a
start till
holiday
the
week.
3rd.
Yeah, it's on the business end, though. It's 3
Yeah,
days
that's-
ahead of
Yeah, it's ahead of the party.
the party. So that'll be a
'Cause the
Tuesday.
following
The
Monday,
4th
that
is
would've been
on.
rough.
When is the 4th is on a
4th
Friday?
Yeah, it's on a
yes.
Friday.
I'm not sure if I will be here.
I was wondering if we should move it to the next week, or,
No,
no?
definitely don't move it to the next week.
Okay.
'Cause that was Monday after.
Will you not be here?
I may not be here, I'm sure.
So I don't, I mean, I'll probably be here. I'm not sure about Wendy and Rebecca. That's all.
I usually take that week off.
Yep. We can, if we do make a motion, and we do double check with our other two members, and we can pull up for a quorum, fine. If we don't, what happens?
Can we schedule for later in the month?
Do we have, do we, how do we fix that, I guess?
It's a
is the
good
word.
question.
I'm assuming we can make it happen, honestly, but,
I mean, you only need
Wendy
3
has
of
a
you.
wedding coming up. I'm not sure. Her daughter's getting married. I'm
Yeah.
not exactly sure when that's
You
happening.
don't wanna do it on the 8th?
the 8th, is that the
That's the second week,
second week?
yeah. Because the first
Could be
is,
a select
Oh,
board
but it's
meeting.
the
Gotcha.
select board. Tuesdays, we
Select
can't do off Tuesdays because
Yeah.
it's the select board.
you know, you don't know, the following Wednesday, we did the one.
SDRB.
This is DRB.
DRB.
The only times it works is if it's a weird month where,
It's 4th of July.
yeah.
That one is-
Yeah, because the meeting itself will not be complicated, typically.
It's true. We're probably not going to get a ton of people to show up.
No, it's pretty
Could you
strict.
call in
I mean, I can probably drive down if I want to, it's fine.
or call in?
You could call in if we actually needed it.
This may be a 10-minute meeting.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine.
it's,
I'll make it work.
You guys have talked through everything.
yeah,
I could put nothing else on the agenda if you'd like.
that's all we'll do anyways, absolutely.
So you want to put just that on the
Just that
agenda?
on the agenda, yep, for sure,
Public hearing.
yep.
Are you in a place where you get a phone service? If we don't have. Okay, so here's what else I'll do. I can call Rebecca and Wendy tomorrow. If I get the sense from them that they can't make it, I'll try to arrange a meeting with you guys to rewarn this to a different date. Because you will have to rewarn it.
Right,
And that does require a meeting, which requires 48 hours of notice. It requires 3 members and 48 hours notice.
yeah,
To publish. But it could all be by phone.
yeah.
So we'll go with that.
All right,
If it
Can you
doesn't
give
work,
us possible dates that if we couldn't do it?
I would poll you guys.
might move it all the way into August.
Yeah.
It's gonna get complicated the next.
Yeah.
After that first week in July, I don't even know where I am.
Because I would need to get you gathered to
People
warn for
camping and
another
jumping
date.
all over the place. It's-
I need to get you together just to take a vote, just to
Yeah, yeah.
warn a different date too.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it would either,
Which wouldn't be able to be this week, because we'd need to
yeah,
post a
so
meeting
The
notice.
only date in August I couldn't do would be the 19th.
Yeah.
But I think it would be before that.
yeah.
Let's just shoot for it and then,
It's just-
We'll shoot for it.
Yep,
We only need 3 of you. You don't all have to be here.
yep.
I think we'll get the same audience we got tonight. I think it'll be 10 minutes, honestly,
Yeah,
because we don't have to talk through it again.
Okay.
We've gone through anything. I'm not going to make any changes, obviously, you're warning it.
Yep.
It's enough to hold the public hearing in case anyone shows up, to do our due diligence there.
yep.
So can I just run through what this motion's going to be? So I'm going to make a motion to accept the amendment and adoption report as, that was amended this evening, to be included in the public warning and distributed accordingly. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Okay.
I think,
You're doing the second motion. That's-
So, just while we're still talking about it. Yes, okay.
okay,
So we're going to stick with that day
yep,
and the 7 PM time.
yep. Couple of phone calls, hopefully, I only need one, yay.
We'll hopefully have you here,
Yeah.
but if you're away
Yeah.
and you just want to phone in, that's fine too. So, sounds
Yeah.
like you're going to be maybe out of town.
I
Go up to.
don't know yet.
If you're in town, step by. But Sound like a plan?
Yes.
So I
Okay.
made,
Yes,
That
we
motion?
need a motion.
oh, so then I
Start with motion number one.
Number one. Okay, I'm making a motion to accept the amendment and adoption report as amended this evening to be included in the public warning and distributed accordingly.
And we have a second
Mhm.
discussion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye,
All right. Now we need a second motion.
you're the second.
You gonna do the second one? Can you read it out?
Motion.
Oh, can we make it bigger?
Yeah.
Hang on.
And the date's July 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
Make a motion to warn the planning commission public hearing at 7 PM for July 1st, 2025, the proposed amendment of Colchester Development Regulation, known as Supplement 48, and reviewed and considered this evening on June, or so July 3rd, 2025. June 3rd.
Need a second?
Yep.
Yep, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Okay, ooh, thank you.
Very good. As good as we get. Okay? All right. So now we just need a new, now we need a motion for minutes.
Okay, I just need to look at the date of the minutes.
May 6th.
Hmm?
May 6th.
Okay, I move that we accept the minutes of May 6th.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anything else we need from you guys? For miscellaneous items?
Miscellaneous items.
We got, that's right, we get the April monthly report.
No,
know, the-
April monthly report, that's just sharing. I'll have the May
Yep.
one. I'll just, I'll save that for next month, or I'll just send it around via email.
Yep.
It should be ready in the next day or so.
Okay,
And then I was just gonna let you know, the Act 181, Tier 1A, Future Land Use Regional Map stuff. I saw an email come in just today, or this week at any rate, this short week here, that they've synthesized all of the feedback that they've received. I haven't read it yet, because I just got it, just saw it today. If there's anything of note in there that has resulted in any changes, the plan is to bring it back to you at a future meeting. If there's not, if it looks like the way you've seen it before, it'll move on to the select board. That's the plan. That's what Rich and I had discussed, and I think that it's sort of what makes most sense. I'll give you guys a heads up, just in case you're interested, in when that lands with the select board. Other items, in case you're curious, will be with the select board next week to talk about fee increases. It's very possible that the select board will be talking on May or June, their second June meeting, whatever date that is.
The 11th, is that when the, oh no, this is
I
the
think that-
DRB, I'm thinking, is meeting.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of meetings in June.
Yeah.
But the second June meeting of the select board is possibly when they'll talk about like the Tier 1A, Tier 1B adoption thing. To be determined, not confirmed, but possibly. So I'll let you guys know as that comes up. I think that's it.
Was there any public feedback about the tiers, about the mapping? Did we hear anything?
I don't know,
Oh, you know.
possibly.
Mhm.
It just got all put together and sent out, and I haven't had a
Mhm.
chance to look at it yet, but I'll look at it, and if there's anything, I mean, I'll send it to you regardless.
Okay,
but
great.
I'll send you the raw
Yeah.
report, and then if there's anything that I notice that I'm like, oh, boy, everybody wanted to talk about this area, I'll point it out,
Okay.
but I'll forward that on.
all right,
I think that's it
that's it.
for me.
All right, need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second? Yep, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned, it is 9:14. Thank you.